He is the most hated man in the world. He also made $1 billion in a single night and gave away $32 billion over a lifetime.
He is the most successful speculator who has ever lived, full stop.
He has done more damage to sovereign economies than most wars.
He is the boogeyman of the modern right, and half of what they say about him is a lie. The other half is true. That's what makes him dangerous.
From a boy hiding in the cellars of Budapest with forged identity papers, to a man who controls a philanthropic network operating in 120 countries, from $250,000 in seed money to $40 billion generated across 5 decades. George Soros has become one of the most influential men ever lived. It is 1930. Europe is a powder keg. The Great War ended barely a decade ago, and the continent is still bleeding from it. Empires have collapsed. Borders have been redrawn. In Germany, a failed painter is building a political movement fueled by resentment and racial hatred. In the Soviet Union, Stalin is consolidating absolute power. And in Budapest, a city of grand boulevards, coffee houses, and a thriving Jewish middle class, a boy is born into a world that does not yet know how violently it is about to break apart. His father, Tivadar, is a lawyer, but not a conventional one. During World War I, he was captured as an Austro-Hungarian prisoner of war and spent 3 years on the run through revolutionary Russia and Siberia. George's mother, Elizabeth, is the counterweight, cultured, traditional, devoted to art and literature. The household is defined by a quiet tension between them. The boy grows up competitive, aggressive, and convinced of his own superiority. He plays a board game called Capital, the Hungarian version of Monopoly, and wins so consistently that he invents new rules to make it harder, including adding a stock exchange. He is not a gifted student. His classmates remember him as average.
He had a hard and dominating character. When he believed in something, he defended very strongly. And he was not an exceptionally good student, but he was somebody who could talk very well.
But as 1944 approaches, for the Soros family, everything is about to change. By the spring of 1944, Jewish communities across Europe have been systematically annihilated. Hungary's 1 million Jews, the largest surviving Jewish population in Eastern Europe, are next. On March 19th, German forces occupy Budapest without firing a shot. The streets empty. The deportations begin almost immediately. Tivadar Soros sees it coming. He has survived one catastrophe already, and he knows exactly what this one requires: deception, speed, and the total abandonment of conventional morality. He tells his 14-year-old son, "This is a lawless occupation. The normal rules do not apply. You have to forget how you behave in a normal society." He purchases false identity papers for George. Overnight, the boy becomes Janos Kiss, the Christian godson of a Hungarian government official. Tivadar arranges similar cover for his wife and older son, Paul. He bribes officials, forges documents, and moves his family between 11 different hiding places across Budapest. Every decision is a calculation. Every day is a performance. George plays his part. The Jewish council assigns him to deliver deportation notices to Jewish attorneys. His father tells him to obey, but to warn every person on the list that these are deportation orders, not routine summons. They report to the rabbinical seminary the next morning. Most do not return. George accompanies his false godfather on trips through the countryside, watching the official confiscate the property of Jews who have already been sent to Auschwitz. He hides in cellars. He speaks to his own father in public as a stranger to avoid betraying their identities. He is 14 years old, carrying false papers, surrounded by death.
He later described this period as the happiest of his life. That sounds shocking, but for a teenage boy with a father he had idolized, it was a pure adventure. Tivadar was his hero. The danger was real, but George experienced it the way a child experiences a war movie, as thrilling, not terrifying. He felt like Indiana Jones, and having his father beside him outsmarting the enemy every day made him feel invincible.
It is understood that in accordance with arrangements between the three great powers, an official announcement will be broadcast by the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock tomorrow. In view of this fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day.
The war ends. The Soros family survives. But for George, the hardest chapter is just about to begin. George Soros arrives in London in the fall of 1947. He is 17 years old. He has almost no money, no connections, and no plan. The city is gray, bombed out, and indifferent to his existence. He takes whatever work he can find. Waiter at Quaglino's in Mayfair, where aristocrats dine and dance while he clears their plates. Farm laborer in Suffolk, picking apples. House painter. Swimming pool attendant. Some nights, he sustains himself on leftover profiteroles. He once envies a cat because it is eating sardines, and he is not.
This was one of the most painful periods of his life. He has survived Nazis, but now he's a nobody, invisible, alone, and terrified of falling even further. He carried that fear with him for the rest of his life. He had hit rock bottoms once, and he was determined to never hit it again.
In 1949, he enrolls at the London School of Economics. It is here that everything changes. He discovers Karl Popper, the philosopher whose ideas about open and closed societies will reshape his entire worldview. Soros is electrified. He dreams of becoming a great thinker, like Freud or Einstein. He begins writing a book he calls The Burden of Consciousness, formulating his own theories about the gap between perception and reality.
Popper's core argument was that no human being can possess ultimate truth, that all knowledge is inherently fallible and open to revision. For Soros, this wasn't just philosophy, it became an operating system. It shaped how he saw markets, how he saw governments, and how he eventually decided to spend his fortune.
But the dream collapses. Soros cannot make his manuscript coherent. He sends it to Popper. The response is polite but lukewarm. His grades are mediocre. The academic path is closed. He takes a job selling handbags wholesale in Blackpool and hates every minute of it. He tries arbitrage at a small London firm. He is not particularly successful. Soon he realizes maybe he needs to move to a new city, a place full of opportunities for someone like him. New York. It is the late 1950s. The United States is the most powerful economy on earth. The war is over. The factories are humming. American industry is producing half the world's manufactured goods. And the center of it all is Wall Street, a closed, insular, overwhelmingly domestic world where traders buy American stocks, follow American companies, and ignore everything else. Europe is rebuilding from rubble. Nobody on Wall Street cares what happens there. Nobody except a 26-year-old Hungarian immigrant who has just stepped off a ship with $5,000 to his name. Soros finds work almost immediately. A London colleague makes a phone call, and FM Mayer, a New York firm, hires him as an arbitrageur. The job is tedious. He buys and sells the same securities across different markets, exploiting small price discrepancies found through meticulous research. It is not glamorous, but it is a door, and Soros walks through it. And soon he finds his edge. American traders know nothing about European securities. They can barely pronounce the names of European firms, let alone value them. Soros can. He speaks French, German, and English. He has contacts across the continent. He has spent years inside the European financial world. He begins advising American institutions on foreign investments, and he finds himself operating in an empty lane.
Nobody knew anything about European securities in the early 1960s. It was strictly a case of the blind leading the blind.
In 1960, Soros spotted something no one else saw. The German insurance firm Allianz was trading at a massive discount to its real asset value. He wrote a research paper recommending the stock. Morgan Guarantee and Dreyfus Fund bought in. Allianz's own management wrote to Soros' bosses complaining he had reached the wrong conclusion. But the stock tripled regardless. That was the Soros pattern. He looked where no one else was looking, and he saw what no one else could see. After Allianz, people on Wall Street started paying attention.
The attention feels good, but it is not enough. Soros is making money for other people, building reputations for other firms. He believes he should be running his own fund, placing his own bets, and soon he will act. In 1969, George Soros launches the Double Eagle Fund with $250,000 of his own money and $6 million from wealthy European investors. It is offshore, based in Curacao in the Dutch Antilles, beyond the reach of SEC scrutiny and U.S. capital gains taxes. It is one of the first hedge funds of its kind. A year later, he finds his other half. Jimmy Rogers is a Yale graduate from Alabama who studied politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford. Soros is the trader. Rogers is the researcher. Together, they operate out of a Spartan 3-room office overlooking Central Park. Just the two of them and a secretary. They work 80-hour weeks. Soros's investment thesis is built on a single conviction. Markets are not rational. They are driven by flawed perceptions that feed on themselves, creating boom and bust cycles. The key is to identify the moment the herd begins feeding on its own frenzy and get there first. He tests the theory immediately. In the late 1960s, he watches high-tech defense companies go on acquisition sprees, inflating their earnings per share and driving institutional investors into a buying frenzy. It is a textbook reflexive cycle. Soros rides the wave up, then shorts the collapse. He makes money in both directions.
From 1969 to 1980, Soros and Rogers never had a single losing year. The fund gained 3,365%. The S&P 500 advanced only 47% in that same period. By 1980, the fund was worth $381 million, and Soros was personally worth $100 million.
That was not luck. That was a man who had found a systematic edge. He could see the shape of a cycle before anyone else knew a cycle had begun. In 1979, Soros renames the fund Quantum, a tribute to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and a declaration of belief that markets are always in a state of flux. The money is piling up. The reputation is growing. But little does he know, he is about to make the biggest mistake of his career. In the late 1970s, America is at a tipping point. The Federal Reserve has declared war on inflation, and its weapon is interest rates. Since late 1979, Chairman Paul Volcker has been ratcheting rates upward with brutal aggression.
Prices in the United States during the first 3 months of 1979 went up at an annual rate of 13%.
When I was appointed by Jimmy Carter, he was kind of up against it. It was a very difficult period. I told him we're going to have to adopt tighter policies, and I felt very strongly about the independence of the Federal Reserve, and that's the way I thought we should act.
By the summer of 1981, rates have climbed from 9% to 21%. The American economy is buckling under the pressure. Soros reads the situation and makes his bet. He believes the economy cannot sustain rates this high. A recession is inevitable. When it hits, the Fed will be forced to cut rates, and bond prices will surge. He begins buying long-term treasury bonds on heavy leverage, betting that the downturn is imminent. He is right about the thesis. He is wrong about the timing.
Soros's prediction was correct, and a recession did come, but it came 6 to 9 months later than he expected. And when you're leveraged on bonds and interest rates keep climbing instead of falling, every single day costs you money. His borrowing costs were at 20%. His bond yields were at 14%. That gap was bleeding the fund dry.
The losses mount through the summer. Clients who had been loyal for over a decade begin pulling their money. One major Swiss investor, whom Soros personally flies to Europe to reassure, withdraws entirely. Others follow. By year's end, the fund has dropped 22.9%. 1/3 of his investors have walked out. Assets collapse from $381 million to $193 million. His business partner, Rogers, is gone. His marriage ended as well. He is running a growing operation alone, and the pressure is crushing him. But he refused to quit. He just needs to find a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Soon, he will find it, and it will lead him to the greatest trade of his career.
I aim to try and tap that great American spirit that opened up this completely undeveloped continent from coast to coast and made it a great nation, survived several wars, survived a Great Depression, and will survive the problems that we face right now.
George Soros has been watching Ronald Reagan's economic policies with growing conviction. Massive defense spending, tax cuts, a soaring dollar attracting foreign capital, a trade deficit ballooning out of control. To most observers, this is the American economy roaring back to life. To Soros, it is something else entirely, a self-reinforcing cycle he calls the imperial circle. A boom that looks unstoppable, but is fundamentally unsustainable. And he believes the breaking point is close. His thesis is precise. The dollar has climbed too high. American exports are being crushed. Domestic industries are hemorrhaging jobs to cheap foreign imports. Eventually, the US government will have no choice but to bring the dollar down. When it does, currencies like the Japanese yen and the German mark will surge. Soros bets accordingly. He builds long positions in the yen and the mark totaling nearly $800 million, more than the entire value of the quantum fund. It is, by any measure, an act of extraordinary conviction, or extraordinary recklessness. For weeks, the currencies move against him. He loses money. He does not flinch. He increases his position. Then, on September 22, 1985, the finance ministers of the United States, France, West Germany, Japan, and Britain meet at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Soros learns of the meeting and works through the night buying yen. The next morning, the ministers announce what becomes known as the Plaza Accord, a coordinated agreement to devalue the dollar.
The United States was facing a real prairie fire of protectionism. There was a lot of protectionist sentiment in the Congress. Legislation was being discussed, if not introduced, and it was our view that something had to be done about that.
The dollar drops 4.3% in a single day, the largest one-day decline in history.
Other traders who had been long the yen started taking profits immediately, thrilled at making so much money so quickly. Soros came bolting out his office, ordering them to stop selling. The government had just told him the dollar was going down for the next year. Why would he sell, right? He bought more. That was the difference between Soros and everyone else. Everyone else just took the profit. He took the jugular.
He makes $40 million overnight. Over the following weeks and months, as central banks keep pushing the dollar down, his gains swell to an estimated $150 million. By year's end, the quantum fund is up 122.2%. Its assets have crossed $1 billion for the first time. He does not know it yet, but the next great cycle is already forming. And this time, he may not survive it. By the fall of 1987, the Dow has climbed from 776 to 2,722 in 5 years. In Japan, stocks are trading at price-to-earnings ratios of 48.5. Soros believes the Japanese market is the bubble, not the American one. In September, he appears on the cover of Fortune and says as much. He moves billions from Tokyo to Wall Street. He is publicly, confidently positioned for Japan to crack. Then comes Friday, October 16th. Soros picks up the phone and calls Stanley Druckenmiller, a 34-year-old fund manager he has been courting for months. Soros tells him he has something to show him. Druckenmiller walks over to Soros's office. Soros pulls out a study from Paul Tudor Jones, charts comparing the 1987 stock market to 1929. The analysis shows an almost exact correlation between the two markets. The conclusion is unmistakable. A crash is imminent. Druckenmiller goes home sick to his stomach. He has just gone 130% long that afternoon trying to pick a bottom. He realizes he has blown it. Soros does nothing. He stays long.
This is the most remarkable part of the story. Soros had the Tudor Jones research. He showed it to another trader, and then he just ignored it. Druckenmiller saw the same charts and went home terrified. On that Monday morning, when the market opened 200 points lower, Druckenmiller liquidated everything in the first hour and went short.
Incredible day on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now down 271.53 points, putting the Dow below the 2,000 mark. The Dow right now at 1975.20.
On October 19th, Black Monday, the Dow crashes 508 points. Soros is massively long. Pit traders detect the whale in trouble. His S&P futures block sells from 230 down to 195. He loses $200 million in a single day. Total damage reaches $350 to $400 million over the following 2 weeks. But the crash barely affects the performance of the quantum fund. By year's end, the quantum fund is still up 14.1%, carried by profits from earlier months. He earns $75 million for the year. But the crash has delivered Soros a gift better than money. Stan Druckenmiller, the man who saw the same research on the same Friday in the same office and acted instantly, liquidated everything, went short, survived. That kind of nerve is exactly what Soros has been searching for. In September 1988, Stanley Druckenmiller walks into the offices of Soros Fund Management for the first time. He is 35 years old. Soros has been calling him my successor since before the ink on the contract was dry. Druckenmiller is not a nobody. He graduated magna cum laude from Bowdoin College. He started at Pittsburgh National Bank, earning $10,800 a year, and was promoted 3 times in 2 years. At 28, he left to start his own fund, Duquesne Capital. By 1986, Dreyfus had recruited him to manage funds, and his strategic aggressive investing fund became the best performing fund in the industry. He has read The Alchemy of Finance and recognized his own trading philosophy in Soros's words. He is ready. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. Soros flies to Eastern Europe to tend to his foundations. With the master gone, applying Soros's own theory from the alchemy, Druckenmiller takes a $2 billion position long the German mark, betting that reunification will strengthen the currency. The mark drops for 2 days. He holds. Then it surges. He shorts the Japanese Nikkei at the same time. Both trades pay off massively.
Druckenmiller had the analytical eye to identify the trade. Soros had the nerve to push the size. When Druckenmiller told Soros he had $1 billion position against the dollar, Soros looked at him and said, "You call that a position?" He told him to double it. That combination, Druckenmiller's precision and Soros's aggression, became the most profitable partnership in hedge fund history.
As the person actually managing the fund, that would have led me maybe to do $2 or $3 or $4 billion, and that was where the combination of experience, courage, whatever you've heard about this man, came into play, because it was he who pushed very, very hard on me to take the position to where we took it, and actually wanted to take it further, but we didn't. We ran out of time.
In 1989, the quantum fund returns 31.6%. In 1990, 29.6%. In 1991, 53.4%. Druckenmiller is averaging 40% annual gains, higher than Soros's own 30% historical average. Soros calls him my alter ego. But even Soros cannot foresee that soon, Druckenmiller is about to pull off one of the biggest trades in history. In 1990, Britain makes a fatal mistake. It joins the European exchange rate mechanism, pegging the pound to the German mark at 2.95. The logic is simple. Anchor your currency to the strongest economy in Europe, and stability will follow. The problem is that the strongest economy in Europe has just absorbed East Germany, and the cost of reunification is staggering.
The scene now here at the Brandenburg Gate and the Reichstag in Berlin is unbelievable pandemonium. It's New Year's Eve, the removal of the wall, and unity all in one. Over 1 million people here celebrating a day that they never thought would come, a day in which Germany became one country again.
Germany keeps interest rates high to fight inflation. Britain's economy is deteriorating. It needs lower rates, cheaper exports, breathing room. It cannot have any of these without breaking the peg. Chancellor Norman Lamont appears on television to declare that there will be no devaluation.
There are going to be no devaluations, no leaving the ERM. We are absolutely committed to the ERM. That is our policy. It is at the center of our policy. We are going to maintain sterling's parity, and we will do whatever is necessary. And I hope there is no room for any doubt about that at all, that the government is determined to maintain our position.
The government is holding a position it cannot sustain. And George Soros knows it. He has met privately with Bundesbank President Helmut Schlesinger and come away with one conclusion. Germany will not cut rates to save Britain. The British are on their own. Soros tells Druckenmiller the thesis is simple. Britain will be forced out of the ERM. The pound will collapse. And the beauty of this trade is that it is what Soros calls a one-way bet. If he is wrong, the pound stays pegged, and he loses almost nothing. If he is right, the profits will be historic.
The risk-reward was absurdly lopsided. The pound could only fall. It couldn't rise meaningfully above the peg because the Bank of England would sell sterling to keep it there. So your downside was tiny and your upside was essentially unlimited. Druckenmiller identified the trade. Soros' contribution was the size. When Druckenmiller proposed a position, Soros told him to go bigger, much bigger.
It is Druckenmiller who pulls the trigger. Acting for Soros, he sells $10 billion worth of sterling short. $10 billion. It is the largest single currency bet anyone has ever made. Soros goes home that evening and sleeps soundly. On September 16, 1992, Britain panics. The government raises interest rates from 10 to 12%. Sterling keeps falling. They raise again to 15%. It makes no difference. By evening, Britain announces it is suspending its membership in the ERM. The pound collapses. The British call it Black Wednesday.
A unique day in London's financial markets ended with the Chancellor announcing that the pound was being suspended from the ERM and that the second of two dramatic interest rate rises during the day was after all cancelled.
Today has been an extremely difficult and turbulent day. Massive speculative flows have continued to disrupt the functioning exchange rate mechanism.
Soros wakes up to an overnight profit of $958 million. When all positions from the ERM crisis are tallied, his total gains approach $2 billion.
This was not just a great trade. This was the trade that proved one man with enough conviction and enough capital could break a central bank. Nobody had done that before. Nobody has done it since at that scale. It was the single most profitable bet in the history of financial markets.
The aftermath cements Soros's legend. For 1992, the Quantum Fund is up 68.6%. Soros personally earns $650 million, the highest income on Wall Street, surpassing even Michael Milken's record. The following year, 1993, he earns $1.1 billion, becoming the first American to clear $1 billion in a single year. The man who survived the Nazis, hit bottom in London, and nearly quit after 1981 is now the undisputed king of the hedge fund world. And the world is just beginning to understand what that means. George Soros didn't break the Bank of England by watching the news. He broke it because he saw what the news wasn't showing. Information nobody else had. Patterns nobody else was reading.
That's the difference between the people who move markets and the people who get moved by them. And in 2026, that gap has never been wider. While you're reacting to yesterday's headline, institutional capital has already moved.
Margin News is a newsletter built on that same principle. It shows you, side by side, what legacy media is broadcasting to retail investors versus what institutional money is actually doing. Pulled from over 50,000 sources, decoded by a network of economists and finance insiders. They don't sell ads, they sell an edge. Twice a week, you get smart money flow tracking, contrarian data signals, and the macro shifts before the herd catches on.
Right now, lock in all access for 50% off. Cancel anytime. See what Soros saw. Subscribe to Margin News.
Between 1994 and 1998, George Soros loses more money on individual trades than most funds will ever manage in total. And yet, somehow, the quantum fund keeps winning. In February 1994, he bets the dollar will rise against the Japanese yen. The yen surges 5% in the opposite direction. He loses $600 million in a single day. His employees call it the Valentine's Day Massacre. In 1997, he shorts the Thai baht and Malaysian ringgit ahead of the Asian financial crisis. The baht collapses. Soros profits. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir calls him a moron and blames Jewish speculators for the collapse. Soros fires back, calling Mahathir a menace to his own country. In 1998, he deploys a double play against Hong Kong, shorting both the currency and the stock market simultaneously. The Hong Kong government spends $15 billion buying stocks to defend its peg. It works. Soros retreats, losing roughly $1 billion. That same year, Russia defaults on its debt. Soros is long, over $2.5 billion invested in Russian businesses. Stocks plunge 80%. He loses $2 billion, the largest single event loss of his career. And yet, the quantum fund ends 1998 up 12.4%.
That is what most people never understood about Soros. They saw the spectacular losses and assumed he was reckless. He wasn't. Every position was structured asymmetrically. Small downside, enormous upside. He cut losers fast and let winners compound. And Druckenmiller managed the portfolio with the same discipline. They didn't need every trade to work. They needed the winners to be gigantic and the losers to be survivable. That's why the fund made money almost every year for 3 decades. Not because they were always right, but because when they were wrong, they got out. And when they were right, they win big.
But the asymmetric model has one vulnerability. It breaks down when the person in the chair stops following the rules. And in the spring of 2000, with the dot-com bubble reaching its peak, Stanley Druckenmiller, the most disciplined trader of his generation, is about to abandon everything he knows. By 1999, the dot-com bubble has consumed Wall Street. The Nasdaq is surging. Technology stocks are delivering returns that make decades of careful investing look quaint. Druckenmiller and Soros both recognize it as a classic reflexive bubble, a self-reinforcing frenzy detached from reality. They are right. And that clarity nearly destroys them.
I think we are in a great bull industrial revolution for the global economy and a great bull market in stocks.
In early 1999, Druckenmiller shorts $200 million in tech stocks, betting the bubble will burst. The short loses $600 million.
It's a painful but really fun story. I shorted, I think it was 11 or 12 internet stocks, not the leaders like AOI or Yahoo, but the also-rans. And I believe the position was like $200 million. And in like 4 weeks, I had lost like $600 million.
By May, quantum is down 18%, while the Nasdaq surges 15%. Druckenmiller reverses, rides the wave up, and finishes 1999 with a 35% gain. He has survived, but something has cracked. In January 2000, Druckenmiller sells everything and sits in cash and euros. It is the right call. But inside the fund, 2 young portfolio managers keep trading tech stocks, making 5% a day. Druckenmiller watches from the sidelines. He cannot stand it. Against every rule he has ever followed, he buys back in. $6 billion worth of technology stocks. He misses the top by approximately 1 hour.
In percentage terms, it had less impact than the crash of '87, but it still left traders and investors shell-shocked.
In 6 weeks, $3 billion is gone.
We ended up the year, I think something like 42 net or something after being in this deep hole because, you know, I rode this crazy NASDAQ wave in '99.
On April 28, 2000, George Soros calls a press conference. Stanley Druckenmiller is departing after 12 years. For the full year, Soros Fund Management has lost $7.6 billion. Assets have collapsed from $10 billion to $4 billion. The Quantum Fund is restructured into the Quantum Endowment Fund, a lower-risk vehicle aimed at 15% annual returns, about half the historical average. $4 billion is returned to outside investors. The greatest run in hedge fund history is over.
What killed them wasn't ignorance. They knew it was a bubble, they said it was a bubble, but knowing and acting are 2 completely different things, especially when the bubble is making everyone around you rich and you're sitting there with cash, watching it happen. The dot-com mania broke the one thing that had made quantum invincible for 30 years. Discipline.
Soros retreats. The fund becomes quieter, more conservative. But Soros does not stop watching the markets. In 2007, at the age of 77, he will return to the chair one final time. And this time, the wolf will really come. In the years after the dot-com crash, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates to historic lows. Cheap credit floods the American housing market. Banks package mortgages into complex securities and sell them to investors worldwide. Rating agencies stamp them with top grades. The entire financial system is leveraged on a single assumption. Housing prices do not fall.
The trend that precipitates it is that credit becomes cheaper and more easily available. The misconception is that the value of the collateral is independent of the availability of credit.
George Soros watches all of it, and he has seen this pattern before. He is 77 years old. The Quantum Fund has been restructured into a conservative endowment. He spends most of his time on his foundations. The financial world considers him a retired legend, a philanthropist who used to trade. Then, in 2007, he announces he is returning to active management. He is going to run the portfolio himself.
One of the biggest names in business is back to trading following a long hiatus. Billionaire hedge fund founder and philanthropist George Soros is making a series of big bearish investments.
His thesis is blunt. He calls it a super bubble. 25 years of credit expansion, deregulation, and speculative excess building toward a collapse unlike anything since the Great Depression. He positions accordingly. He shorts US and European equities. He shorts the dollar and 10-year treasury bonds. He goes long on Chinese, Indian, and Gulf states stocks, betting that emerging economies will hold up better than the over-leveraged West. What Soros understood, and what almost nobody else was willing to say out loud, was that the entire Western financial system was built on a feedback loop of bad debt. The mortgage securities were mispriced. The ratings were fraudulent. The leverage was insane. And when the loop broke, it would not correct gently. it would collapse reflexively, each failure triggering the next.
They're mortgage bonds supported by pools of loans, and most of the loans are what are called negative amortizing interest-only loans, which means that you, the homeowner and buyer, you borrow the money, and you not only don't have to repay your principal, you don't even have to repay the interest. And if you just don't pay anything, they just add to your loan.
He had been describing this exact mechanism since the 1980s. The only difference was that this time, the scale was civilizational.
This weekend, perhaps more so than any weekend in the history of American finance, and also over the past 6 months, 3 of the 5 investment banks of this country now either no longer exist, whether they are bankrupt or whether they are being bought by other companies.
Lehman has lost $6.5 billion so far this year, and its shares have plunged more than 80%. Third quarter losses alone total $3.9 billion.
The payoff is enormous. In 2007, the quantum fund returns approximately 32%. Soros personally earns an estimated $2.9 billion, second only to John Paulson among hedge fund managers. In 2008, while the S&P 500 falls 37% and the average hedge fund drops 19%, the quantum endowment fund gains roughly 8%. George Soros has made more money than anyone could possibly dream, but little does he know he is about to become the world's public enemy number 1.
In my opinion, he fundamentally hates humanity. That's my opinion.
In 2002, a French court convicts George Soros of insider trading related to a 1988 purchase of Société Générale shares. He's fined 2.2 million euros. He appeals to the European Court of Human Rights. He loses 4-3. It is the only criminal conviction of his career.
A French court has handed down a criminal conviction to the man who famously broke the Bank of England. George Soros, the billionaire philanthropist and titan of macro trading, has been found guilty of insider trading.
But it is not the law that makes Soros controversial. It is what he does with his money. In 2004, he declares that defeating George W. Bush is the central focus of my life and pours $27 million into the effort. Bush wins.
The President of the United States!
But Soros does not stop. His political spending escalates year after year. $81.5 million in 2020, $128.5 million in the 2022 midterms, making him the single largest individual donor in American elections. He funds progressive district attorney campaigns across the country, spending at least $40 million to elect roughly 75 prosecutors. He becomes the most politically consequential private citizen in America, and the most hated.
In my opinion, he fundamentally hates humanity. That's my opinion. Well, he's doing things that erode the fabric of civilization. You know, getting DAs elected who refuse to prosecute crime. That's part of the problem in San Francisco and LA and a bunch of other cities. So why would you do that?
On October 22nd, 2018, a pipe bomb is found in the mailbox of Soros's compound in Katona, New York. The bomber, Cesar Sayoc, is sentenced to 20 years.
Police say Monday afternoon, an employee found a package in one of these mailboxes, opened it, and discovered a suspicious device inside.
By 2023, George Soros is 92 years old. The Quantum Fund has been operating as a family office for over a decade, managing approximately $28 billion under CEO Don Fitzpatrick. The billion-dollar currency bets are gone. The overnight killings are gone. What remains is a quieter machine, still profitable, still active in global markets, but no longer the force that once broke central banks and terrified governments. On June 11th, 2023, the Wall Street Journal reports what the financial world has long anticipated. George Soros has formally handed control of his empire to his 37-year-old son, Alexander.
In the billionaire Soros family, George Soros, the controversial Hungary-born US hedge fund tycoon, has handed over the reins of his $25 billion empire to his son, Alexander.
In January 2025, President Biden awards Soros the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. Alexander accepts on his father's behalf, but the honor does not make people actually love him. Nothing can. George Soros remains the most paradoxical figure in modern finance.
He gave away $32 billion to promote democracy, human rights, and open societies across 120 countries. That is a fact. He also used his wealth to reshape criminal justice systems, fund political campaigns, and influence elections on a scale no private citizen has ever attempted. That is also a fact. Whether you see him as the greatest philanthropist of his era or the most dangerous political operator depends entirely on which set of facts you choose to emphasize.
He has 5 children, 3 marriages behind him, a net worth estimated between $7 and $10 billion, and a philanthropic legacy of $32 billion distributed across more than 120 countries. He has been called the world's greatest investor, the man who broke the Bank of England, a moron, a puppet master, a saint, and a villain. From a 14-year-old boy hiding from the Nazis in the cellars of Budapest, to a man who made $958 million in a single night, from $250,000 in seed money to $40 billion generated across 5 decades. He may have really lived like a god. But whether his life made the world a better or worse place remains undecided.